Hello, welcome to my next video. I think it's the fourth one. I need to probably keep an eye on that. Okay, so this video I'm going to talk about something that's been part of my life since 2002, and something that I didn't keep from people, but I didn't necessarily tell them about it. And that's the fact that I'm a diabetic, type 1. Now, these days, my friends now all know that I'm a diabetic because, it is actually important. It's important. No, it's not actually. It's very important for people to know. But I'm just going to share a few things that, advances that happened over the last 22, almost 23 years. Things that changed, things that got better, things that got worse. So stick around if you just want to learn something about diabetes. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 15. That was in 2002. Now you can figure out how old I am. I was in grade 9 back then, and in that time, it was almost it wasn't bad news, but it was almost like because you were told that you can't eat sugar at all anymore. Not that I had a sweet tooth. I liked the occasional chocolate, and I loved some Fanta grape now and then. But it's not like I overdrank on stuff like Coke and overate on sweets. It wasn't a very big deal for me to stop eating sugar, but it also is. It's not nice when you're 15, you can't eat sugar anymore. Back then, there was, of course, health food available, but it was much more expensive than the normal food. So financially, it was also not great being a diabetic back then. It was never the biggest thing I had to adapt to was the fact that I had to inject insulin into my body, because of course when you're a diabetic type 1, your pancreas either makes very little insulin or it doesn't make insulin at all, which means you have to physically get the hormone into your body. And what actually happened after that, after I finished school, is that because you put a synthetic hormone into yourself, I started picking up weight, which wasn't great, but I tried to keep myself as healthy as possible, and I am still as healthy as I can be. But that was the biggest thing I had to adapt to, was injecting myself. Now, to be honest, when they showed it to me in the hospital, because I was in the hospital for 4 days away from school, because my sugar was, I think, 21 when I was diagnosed, which is quite high for that age. It's high anyway, but it's quite high for a 15-year-old. So I had to spend 4 days in the hospital while they, checked that my sugar came down, and I checked that I could inject myself. But the injection wasn't a big deal for me because I was never afraid of needles. So I can't imagine how people feel that gets diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and they have to inject themselves and they don't like needles or they are afraid of needles. But that was never an issue for me. Another thing that I had to adapt to was the fact that I had to test my blood glucose, my blood sugar, the whole time, and I had to check that it stays within the limit between about 5 and 9. It was something to adapt to. I'm not gonna lie, but I must admit that I think I adapted very easily to it compared to some other people. Yes, it's been quite a journey for me. So I'll just quickly explain the two types of diabetes that you get. The main two types is type 1 and type 2. You heard me saying that I was diagnosed type 1 diabetic. Type 1 is, as I said, where your pancreas makes either very little insulin or doesn't make insulin at all. Type 2 diabetes is generally diagnosed in older people, and a lot of the time it is people who are either quite overweight or a little overweight. But it's also something that's been proven to be genetic, the same as type 1 diabetes. There seems to be a genetic factor to it. But type 2 is actually insulin resistance more. So your pancreas still makes insulin for a certain amount of time, but your cells, the cells that take in the insulin to distribute it throughout the body to lower the glucose, can't take it in. So type 2 diabetics have to take a pill. A lot of the time it's glucophage or metformin, but there are other genetic versions as well, and other pills where it helps the cells to take in the insulin that their pancreas is making. Now, after years of having type 2 diabetes, there might be a time where your pancreas decides, I'm not going to make insulin anymore, because the pancreas, it's like it realizes that your body can't take the insulin in. Then you have to inject insulin as well. So there are type 2 diabetics who take the pills and have to inject insulin, but those are diagnosed type 2 diabetics. So you also get diagnosed type 1 diabetics, of which I am one now, who get insulin resistant after a few years. Now, this can be because we are predisposed to it. It could be because we have picked up weight from injecting a hormone or from other medications that we take, which I think was my situation. I picked up a little bit too much weight and I became insulin resistant. Now I'm also now on medication to help with the insulin resistance. But technically type 1 diabetics don't necessarily get insulin resistant, but after years of taking insulin, it is very possible for you to also get insulin resistant, like type 2 diabetics. But it doesn't make you a type 2 diabetic. It's just a side effect. It's a complication of type 1 diabetes. There are also many complications. Type 2 diabetics tend to get complications much easier. There are cardiovascular complications. There are neuropathy. There's neuropathy, nerve complications that you can get from either type 1 or type 2. Your feet needs to get taken care of very, very well when you're a diabetic, because that is the last place where your blood circulation goes to. So because a diabetic, our blood circulation can become slower over the years, and it's the same with type 2 diabetics. You have to check that your feet are very well taken care of. You might have heard of people who had amputations because of type 2 diabetes. That is most likely why. If you don't take care of your feet and you don't check that you have a pulse in your feet, or you check that you have feeling in your feet, that is part of neuropathy as well. That's when the nerves stop, it starts dying in your body, and yeah. Then kidney problems are also it's also a complication of diabetes. The biggest problems are your cardiovascular problems and your nerve problems. But you can live a very, very long life. As I said, I've been a diabetic for almost 23 years. October this year would be 23 years. And I've barely had any complications. The only what I would call a complication that I had is that I am now slightly insulin resistant. But I mean, that's manageable. It's very manageable. So, okay, so that's the two types of diabetes that you get. Just quickly explained how they work. So, my kit for years, since I was diagnosed, was always you had to have your insulin, which also changed. Now I'm on 2 types of insulin. I used to be only on 1 type. And your blood sugar meter, which of course you need to keep track of, because you need to know what your sugar is constantly. One advance that is absolutely amazing for diabetics now is the Libra meters. Now I only got a Libra 2. I never had a Libra 1. The Libra is a sensor that you put on your arm. There's mine. You put it on your arm, and it keeps track of your blood sugar permanently. But now the Libra 1 that I never had was one that you had to scan with your phone if you wanted to know what your sugar is. Now the Libra 2 connects with Bluetooth to your phone, and you constantly know what your sugar is. It is amazing. You can check how it was over the last 30 days, over the last 60 days, 90 days. So you can check your blood sugar, your glucose levels constantly. I must admit that I am extremely happy that I started using it because, okay, it is still very expensive here in South Africa, but maybe overseas as well, I'm not sure. But it is really amazing to know exactly, my blood glucose the entire time. Something that I have struggled with for years now, because of my diabetes, which is a bit contrasting actually, is low blood sugar, strangely. But a lot of type 1 diabetics struggle with it because you inject synthetic insulin. The insulin works differently a lot of the time, or you inject too much by accident and you get hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar. It's a hypoglycemic episode or attack. Now, hypoglycemic episodes are not something that's easy to deal with for the people close to you because you change. You can, different people get different symptoms. Mostly you start trembling, you can barely walk, you might fall, you get stubborn, you get irritated, you almost don't want to, you can't stand on you can't be stable, it's a very difficult thing to deal with for the people around you, but it is very easy to fix. I mean, the only thing you need is Coke or Super C's or something with a high concentrate of sugar, some cranberry juice, also something that people use. It's easy to fix short term, it's very easy to fix. Whereas hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar, which is also, you can also have spikes in your blood sugar if you inject too little. The problem with that is it takes longer to deal with. It takes longer because you have to physically inject insulin to bring it down, and it takes a while for the insulin to work sometimes. The thing with hyperglycemia is long term. If you have more hyperglycemic episodes, long term it becomes a problem because then you're more at risk for kidney problems, you're more at risk for liver problems, you're more at risk for the neuropathy that I mentioned. Whereas hypoglycemia doesn't necessarily have long-term complications, it has short-term complications. Yes, you can go into a coma, but it's very easy to fix in the short term. Thank you so much for watching and letting me share this experience or this journey with you. Maybe you yourself is a diabetic, or maybe you have friends or a friend who's a diabetic, and maybe you understand them better now. It has been quite a journey, and I am grateful that I could share it with you. See you in the next episode.